Welcome to the London Horror Movie Club. I'm horror writer Lauren Jane Barnett.
And I'm Chris Sapikowski, Lauren's older brother, and I've been watching horror movies since I was 8.
Join us as we talk about the wild, weird, and wonderful horror films set in England's eerie capital. Welcome back, everyone, to our Hollow Week of interviews. Today, we have something really special and really different. Joining us are Alex Moran, a performer and producer, and Ryan Simmons, who's writer and director, and they both are doing shock horror. Trying to describe this, I've been rattling my brain, and the best I can come up with, I hope this does you justice, guys, is it's a combination of film and immersive theater wrapped around a ghost story, throwing everything it can at your senses. And the story at the heart of it is quite cool. A man obsessed with finishing his life's work and a huge horror fanatic returns home to a haunted cinema. His mind unravels and painful memories wake the dead, but something else waits for him that's much worse. I stole that bit from you. Great description. Welcome, you guys.
I think that's better than anything we could ever create.
Yeah,
ourselves.
that is an amazing intro. We love it.
I might steal it.
Take it, do with it what you wish.
Thanks,
My favourite bit was that at the end.
It helps having the nails. The nails make it.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. I want to jump right in and ask. Like Lauren had said earlier, I kind of went through all the YouTube clips, and I was getting more and more excited. I was like, I've never seen anything like this, and it's that immersion of like video and also live theater, and just what gave you guys that idea to even pursue this?
Shall I tag in, Ryan? Shall I go with that?
Yes, you take that.
Chris, it was an idea I had that began when I was 15 years old, because I loved The Woman in Black as a kid, and I really loved that ghost story element, but I was really keen on bringing multimedia into it, something highly visual, especially with the idea of bringing a lot more young people into theatre. So I just sort of said to Ryan, I want to do a ghost story with multimedia. There you go, write it. And that's kind of what I did.
And I said to Alex, but so much could go wrong with that. Are you sure? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's just do it. Let's do it. And I was thinking, it sounds really exciting, but it absolutely petrified me. The thought of it, because I thought, what is that handover like? What is that language between the screen and the stage? How do we weave those two worlds together? But Alex just refused to take no for an answer. He just, no, it will work. Just do it. And so we did it, and it worked. So you were right, Alex. Well done.
But I think for me, though, buddy, again, not to blow smoke, but it was asking somebody with such a wonderful penchant for horror cinema. It was such an understanding, in my opinion, of horror cinema, and bringing that onto stage. You had to have that to be able to create what you've done. So I was asking the right person. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I kept saying, keep going, because I knew you could do it. I couldn't have done it myself, never, but you could do it, and you did it. You did it really well. So.
Yeah. It was great. It was a difficult process. It was a difficult journey of just getting the right feel between the way that scares work on the screen and the way that scares work in the room are two different things. Although they do have that common thing of sound, you get the right soundscape and you will get the scares. And so we worked really hard on that. And we had we've got a great composer who has really helped tie those two worlds together. Phenomenal. So the stage and screen just feel they just feel like they're one and the same thing. There's no separation between them.
I love what you said about the scares in theater and cinema, because I was thinking that as well watching it. It must be really challenging to use sort of both mediums to get a scare. In addition to sound, were there any things that you found really helpful, or conversely, something that was just made it seem almost impossible and you weren't sure how to deal with it?
Go on, I'm going to leave Ryan to answer that. Ryan. Sorry, Ryan. Difficult question. Go.
Yeah, there was some things that we wanted to do There are when you're dealing with cinema and cameras, it's really quite easy to make someone transform, say, from a person into a demon. You can just cut the camera. And we wanted to do that on stage. And so that was really difficult because we thought, okay, the front row are 6 feet away from these actors.
Yeah.
How on earth do we get someone to transform in front of your eyes? And so that was about us going on a search for the right illusionist.
Very lucky with what we had, wasn't it? It's really weird though, because being on the other side of it and seeing how it's done, you think, how does an audience not see it? How do they not spot, see all the strings, all the bells and whistles? It just seems so simple, but it's the lighting, it's the effects, it's the sound, as you say. It's what John Bullied and Sam Lupton have done together with the illusions. It's amazing, isn't it, what they've done with that to transform, as you say. It's great.
There was the team who worked on this. They work on the Harry Potter stage show in London, where they do some really crazy things like make people disappear down phone lines, again, in front of your eyes. And it's just so strange. So we basically went looking at as many stage shows as we could that had horror or illusions in them. And it was just crazy seeing what was out there. But it's like anything, once you get the right team, things really do start to fall into place, and suddenly the kind of things that you want to do that you thought were crazy, you get somebody and they say, yeah, I can do that. I can make them transform into a demon. You say, how? And they say, well, you have to pay me. I'm not just going to tell you. And so we had this really weird transaction where we were saying, but what if you can't? And they said, I can do it. And we go, but you need to tell us so we know. And he said, I'm not telling you. That's what the contract is. So you have this leap of faith where you get the team in, and then you start to peek behind the curtain to realize how these illusions work. But again, what's lovely about theatre is it's that complete suspension of disbelief. You know it's an actor on stage, and you know that you're not really in a haunted cinema, but we constantly have people run out of the theatre in terror. And the usher says to them, are you okay? Is everything okay? And they say, yeah, I'm really sorry. I just have a phobia about puppets. And, it's great to watch it. It's really satisfying when you see the whole audience jump at the same time at a moment, or you see somebody run out because you've just hit the fear button and you've got it just right. And that's what we've been really lucky with the team that we've got working on this. That people loved and do love horror. And so everyone's just got that interest to say, how do we tweak this to make it even more scary? We don't settle with it. We just keep pushing to say, there's got to be something more we can do to make it scary or even scarier. So yeah, I totally forgot the question. I don't know where we started.
No, I think it's great though, because honestly, that made me want to ask you other questions that go along with it, because it's very rare, I guess, in the movie. And I don't do anything. I don't make movies. I don't do anything like that. But when we talk to different directors and stuff, their audience, they're making a movie out of they're doing what they want in their head, and they're hoping the audience is receptive to that. Where you get to see the audience's reactions on a nightly basis, right? I mean, and so it's really has to be gratifying in that way, but also one of those things like, how do you up that ante, right? Like, or how do we make this piece better? Or like, we thought this was going to do this. And do you like working in that environment where you kind of get that instant feedback?
Yeah. I think when, I've worked in low budget horrors in the past, and it's a long process. You know, you're writing something and it feels like it's working in your head. You shoot it and it doesn't feel scary at all because there's no feedback mechanism in the room. You know, you've got a shot, you know that the music's got to go alongside it. You know, it's got to be edited. You might have some VFX to go with it. Wherever possible, I try to do things in camera, but so often it's just not possible. So it's quite a long process before from that original thinking of an idea to actually seeing it in a cinema with an audience. And it's really hard work when it doesn't land and you think, oh, I was convinced that was going to scare them. Why didn't it? In theatre, the feedback is immediate. You know, we come up with a concept, we put a scare together, we test it in front of the audience, and you get that feedback there and then. That worked, or there's something wrong. And usually it's timing levels. You know, you can tweak something. So you say, just hold it a couple of beats longer before you walk over to that door. And what didn't get a scare one night, the next night gets a huge scare.
It's part of the fun, isn't it? It's what I enjoy. It's what Dyson and Nyman did with Ghost Stories as well when they opened. I believe they opened in Liverpool. And we talked about this, didn't we, Ryan? They tweaked it so much, didn't they, during that run? You know, we were tweaking this last year up until this year, and we're still tweaking now, aren't we? Because as you say, it's quite exciting that we can make it even scarier, which is great.
And it just depends on the audience as well. You know, some people have a fear of clowns and some people have a fear of puppets, balloons. You know, you just don't know what is going to register. And because of the nature of this show, it does cover a lot of horrors. It covers a lot of types of different scares. And sometimes you get an audience who just get really freaked out by something supernatural. And sometimes you get people who get freaked out by kids' toys. So it's different each night, you know, and it is fascinating to sit and watch an audience and just say, oh, okay, I had no idea that that's the kind of thing you would find scary. You know, we have this lovely image where Herbert, he loves the kind of the Stephen King stuff, and a red balloon comes out at one point, and there was a night in London where the audience just gasped when this balloon came out, and it's just collectively, it was just there's like an energy that gets passed around the room, and collectively that night. It was a balloon night where they all went, not a balloon. but other nights, they might not. No, I like that. Yeah, sometimes they don't, they're scared of it. But you get nights where one element really is just terrifying that particular audience. So I tend to find, you know, I spend more time watching the audience and just their reactions. I just find it fascinating as to the way that exchange of fear and how they invest in the story and how the scares register. I just find it endlessly fascinating watching them.
I'm so curious now to know if any of the things for either of you that you're afraid of made it into the play. Yeah. Would you tell us more?
For
I
me,
don't want to ruin the play, obviously, but yeah.
No. I mean, for me, I had just being in a bedroom at night was just a scary world for me. And I loved that. I found it like I would deliberately expose I put myself in a place where I knew it was going to be scary because I kind of enjoyed that sense of, is there a ghost in the wardrobe? Or if a door blows open by itself, but then nothing happens. For me as a kid, that was that strange place between I'm really excited, but I'm going to scream. I need someone to help me because I'm so petrified. So there were lots of dreams, and I would say film references that I watched as a kid that made it into the show, just because I thought, I remember watching that, like Salem's Lot, the TV version, and just I can't describe how scared I was of that thing. Now, when I watched it back recently, and I thought, oh, it's not quite what I remembered it to be. I loved it, but it's like I can almost see through some of the scares. Whereas as a kid, I couldn't. That vampire tapping on the window, that boy.
Let me in.
Oh.
I think I'd go more psychological, really. And this is a testament to Ryan's writing. And for me, what scared me as a kid was being unloved and being alone. And that's something that's very apparent for Herbert's story, really, which is beautiful, quite cathartic to play, but also terrifying to play. Being alone in the dark, but being alone, and his parents sort of not as interested in helping him or hearing from him is, that scared me as a kid, and I think that's very apparent in the story, which is really scary. Sometimes it's funny, isn't it, Ryan? The feedback we've had from the show is that the true horror, as well as the jump scares and the loot and bust scares and all those things, the true horror is the situation Herbert finds himself in, isn't it? It's really, really terrifying.
Yeah, we wanted a show that just wasn't just about, we're going to make people jump. Because something that we talked about quite a lot in rehearsals was, it's not the jump that is the scary bit. It's the creeping up to the monster. It's that long walk up to where you think it's hiding. That's where the scare lives. You know, when you actually have the pop, the jump scare, it's like that's the tension broke and that's the release. But really, it's that initial bit of, I've heard a noise and there's something behind that door and I'm in the dark and I've got to go and see what it is. And it's that long walk over and putting your hand on the door and slowly opening and slowly looking, that's the scare for us. So it was about, how do we create a story that is really touching and brings you in to the character's world, so that we can explore these scares, not just say, we're going to put every 5 pages, we're just going to put a jump scare, because they're party tricks. I think we wanted something where it was almost like The Exorcist. You know, I was listening the other day and somebody was saying that it was, it's not so much, it's not a horror story, is The Exorcist. The Exorcist is about somebody who's lost their faith, and you've got the priest on the one side, and then you've got the mother who's trying to desperately find faith, and the kids in the middle, and that is the battle. That's what the film is. It's not a horror. It's exploring that journey of trying to find something. The horror happens on top. And we went for something similar to say, let's really explore a character's world, to say, what happens when somebody does something bad to you, but you love them, so you're desperately trying to protect them, but at the same time, they're not doing the right thing by you. And what happens if the world is locked out? So you have a character where his parents have said, the outside world is too scary for you. We're going to lock you in. So you don't go out, you don't have friends, you stay in here with us. The problem is he's in a cinema, and his dad, all he screens is horror movies. So you're locked into a world where you're surrounded by horror, and you've got somebody and his mum who's got mental health issues who's saying to him, I'm doing this to look after you. I'm looking after you by keeping you safe. And he's locked inside, all alone, in this cinema that is dedicated to horror. And that was, once we created that world, it just felt fascinating then to explore the the character and you know what scared him and what he was searching for, and what happens when you are all alone, as in you don't have friends, you don't have somebody who you can say, what do I do about this? You know, you go down a rabbit hole of the films in your life become the reference of how you should deal with things. You know, if somebody's not well, they need an exorcism because that's your reference. That's the film you've watched. You know, if you hear something tapping outside, it can only be a vampire. Because what else would you think? They're your references. So, yeah, that central story that Alex just plays beautifully, that really mattered to us. Getting that right was what we wanted more than anything else. We wanted it to be scary, but that character of Herbert's journey, we spent so much time trying to perfect that, because we knew that's where the audience would absolutely go on a journey with us once they invested in that character.
Yeah.
Wow.
Alex, I have a question for you.
Of course.
You were saying that is something that kind of was the fear for you, was that being alone and being, you know, like that. Is it a draining process? I mean, as Ryan's telling us kind of the story there, and knowing that you had said that was your fear, is it draining on like each performance for you to go through that?
I would say no. Because it's so much fun. I know that sounds really strange, but it's a beautiful story. And, you know, I've wanted to perform. I've always wanted to work in theatre. I never was really ever that interested in film or TV. And it's not that I wouldn't do it if I was asked. It's just that the connection you have with an audience, immediate connection, as Ryan says, is so wonderful. And it's to tell a story and to engage them and to take them away for 2 hours from their lives so that they can engage in this really incredible story about cinema and all the ghosts and everything that goes on. It's not draining at all, because when you connect to the text and it's so well written and you connect to a character that was created for you, it's very special and not something I've ever done. I've never worked on a show where a character's been created for me. It's beautiful. So no, not draining at all. It's incredibly fun, which I know you'd think it would be draining in a sense, but it isn't. And when everything pops, I can't describe what it's like, but it does take a lot of work to get everything to pop, and those fine-tuning things that we've had to do to make sure everything pops and everything goes at the right time. Sometimes technically, if anything does go wrong, which it doesn't very often, but if it does, it can take you out of it for a split second, just because it's horror and those things have to work. It's not draining. It just means you've got to keep your actor's head on and focused and keep telling the story, because the story is without a doubt the most important part. And because Ryan's got that right, it makes it very easy. I don't say easy, but it makes it very fun. Very fun. So thanks. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just the story sounds amazing. And the way you tell it is just like, I think anybody can relate to it, because you're not talking about a singular fear. I mean, just that reference point of, if this is all you know was the tapping on the window or this, that's so true, because we're all built into the references that we've grown up with. So being that was your kind of one of your fears, it made me think, I'm like, oh man, would I want to face my fear on a daily basis? Or then would it not be a fear anymore, because I faced it every single day or every time I'm doing it?
I think you're right. It has helped. It definitely has helped, yeah, with my upbringing. Yeah.
Although I'll never get over heights, so it doesn't matter. I've tried everything except for skydiving. I'm still going to be afraid of heights. And it doesn't.
Do you know what, Chris? Do it. Skydive, because that changed my fear of heights.
Did it
honestly?
Really?
Yeah, because I always thought, again, obviously okay to say this on a horror podcast, but when you free fall, I always thought, I'll be so glad when the parachute comes out, because obviously, like, that means I'm safe. But the free fall is so enjoyable and terrifying in the same way that when the parachute comes up, you go, oh, gutted. Because you just want to keep free falling. And that's honestly true. That's genuinely true. Anyway, sorry, that's true.
That's great. I don't know if I'm going to try it, but I'm going to take your word for it. So maybe someday I will try it.
Yeah.
We talked around. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris. You had a question.
No, go ahead. You're good. Go.
No, we talked around a lot of like cinema references since he's stuck in a cinema house and how much references cinema. And obviously, so it's a sort of film-based podcast. What were some of the horror films that you were really excited to bring in? And are there any you really wished you could have but just wouldn't work?
That's tricky.
That's a good one, Ryan. Any you wish we could have in that we could maybe put in again next year? Anyway, go for it.
There are two that I would love to have referenced, but they didn't feel right, and because they're more on the kind of monster movie side of things, I guess. Like American Werewolf in London, I just love, and I would have loved to have referenced that.
Fright Night? Would you have
one we were just talking about the other day, Fright Night.
Yeah.
Original. And I thought, that has just got so many good bits. But when it strays into that horror comedy, they're a bit more difficult. They don't quite fit in the same way. But we got lots. We've got lots and lots of references. There's a lot of the 80s films. There's a great moment where we put Alien. Herbert recreates Alien with some teddies, and so we have this amazing scene where this teddy's stomach explodes on the big screen, and that was fun. That was really fun to put in, and I think the one that I actually discovered a bit later, I knew about it but never really watched it, or I'd kind of seen clips and never really sat down and watched it. And that was the Anthony Hopkins Magic, with the ventriloquist dummy.
I don't actually know this. Do you mind telling me a bit more?
So he's, and I've since looked into this, and there's actually quite a long line of horror films about ventriloquist dummies that basically take over the puppeteer. So we have this puppet that's within the show, and a lot of people think it's Chucky. And we go, actually, it's not, but you can see where Chucky came from when you go down the line. I think there was one called The Great Gabbo. So I think that's one of the originals. But yeah, Anthony Hopkins basically has this puppet called Fats, and he's struggling. He just can't seem to get a break in his career. And then he discovers Fats, and suddenly his career takes off. But you never quite know whether this puppet is alive or it's just alive in his head. And gradually it starts to take over. It's the puppet that's in charge. And it's Anthony Hopkins, so the performance is just incredible. But I just loved the puppet, and that had a huge influence on the writing of this. So that film in particular really had a big influence. And again, it's a moment in the show that the audience, they all just love it. Some people love it because it scares them. Some people find it quite funny. It's just they're just evil. When you look at those dummies, they're all evil. Where you just think that all you have to do is put a light, uplight its face, and instantly you've just got this horror picture where you think, oh, that is, it sends shivers because it's just creepy. So that film had a huge influence. And then you've just gone for so much of the Stephen King, kind of The Shining, and it's again the original. It's the 80s version of it. There's so many of those shows that they all just got little references that are peppered throughout. We've got a section on Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's quite a big influence.
Yeah.
Has a big influence on Herbert and some of his...
And the outcome of the story as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really foreshadows. Yeah. It's A Pet Cemetery just comes in there briefly, doesn't it? Psycho is referenced quite a bit.
Psycho's huge. Psycho and The Shining are huge. And we wanted to explore this idea of do horror films plant bad images in young brains? Is it the horror film that makes people go on to do these horrible things, or would they have done it anyway? And that's not really for us to answer. We explore that, and we have our feeling on that, but we like the audience to watch it and come to their own conclusion and say, look, is it nature or is it nurture? Have these films put bad thoughts in his head, and he's, certainly towards the end, he does some horrific things, I don't want to give anything away, but he turns out he does some bad things because he's been treated in a bad way. But when you really think about it, and if you were to watch the play, you would think, has he done that because as a 10-year-old, he's watched something he shouldn't have done, and he's watched a film that is for a much older audience, or would he have done it anyway? And so that's what we explore within the show, the films and the references and how they influence a young mind.
Awesome. I need to come over just to the UK just to go see this show. Are you coming to America? That's the next.
Wow, do you know what, Chris? We'd love to. We'd really love now. I mean, The Woman in Black took 2 years to get into the West End. We're touring it again next year in 2025. It's a big tour next year with the hope maybe of transferring in 2026. That's what we would love, isn't it, Ryan? And I would love to do a US tour, because I think it'd be amazing to play to US audiences, because I love going to America, especially the East Coast. Got quite a penchant for the Boston Red Sox, but we'd love to. We'd love to take it to America. I think it would work incredibly well over there as well. I'd like to think so, anyway. So yes, that would be amazing.
I think
I can go there and see it, and then I can come back, and when you guys tour here, I'll watch it too. I've got to see this. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's kind of, there's so much American influence.
Yeah, incredible. A lot of American accents used as well, isn't there, because of that influence and things with, voiceovers and things, yeah.
So when Herbert starts to hear voices, and we don't know, are they voices in his head, or is the cinema haunted? But those characters that come to him, they speak with American accents, because that's his influence of, the films that he watches. For him, it was all American horror, really, that was so big, and it's set that he grew up in the 80s. So American horror was really just the best in the world. For me at that time, it was just so every other week a new film would come out that would just push the genre in a new way that I just thought was really exciting. So there is a big American influence in the show, and that was certainly, for me, growing up in the middle of England, that was the 80s. There was so much American influence in our life. And it was just like this. Everyone wanted to go to America. Everyone wanted to go and visit America, because we'd see the films and we'd just go, that looks so amazing. That world that they're in, like Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist. I can remember watching that street. Now, I can appreciate now, as I've grown up, that not every street is like that one. But in my head, I thought all kids in America lived like that.
Well, every estate's built near a burial ground as well.
We all live next to burial grounds.
Every one of us.
Yeah, and that cool scene with the remote control car, and the guy trips over with the beer, and the beer's spraying out, and he's drinking it. And I thought, I want to live like that. That just looks amazing. So for me, I think American culture was so influential, and you could see it throughout the play, really. So we think it would be a great fit if it toured America. There's so much that I think an American audience would recognize, to say, oh yeah, this was, this is our world as well. It's kind of, we'd put the two together.
What movies inspired both of you? Like, so you obviously are horror movie fans. You're grabbing this. What was that movie? I guess Lauren and I have always talked about like there's something that kind of grabs you, and you can like a lot of them, but there was always that first one that you kind of. Like, I think it still holds in high regard. What was that for you guys?
Halloween for me. It's one of the wonderful things about the show is we've been working a lot with younger people. So we're over in Rugby recently doing workshops with younger people, and I had to do a sort of workshop. I mean, Ryan wasn't there, so I didn't have the master. So I sort of the apprentice sort of had to take over really, and I did a whole thing on suspense because I wanted them to be able to create suspense, and I just think it's a lesson in suspense. I absolutely love what Carpenter does with it, and played a few of the videos and some of the short scenes and what he does with it. And I just think that slow creep, as Ryan says, we sort of know the creature's going to come out at some point. We know Michael Myers is going to appear at some point, but we just don't know when. And I think it's a real lesson in suspense for me. I love what he did. And I think this show does adopt quite a lot of that in terms of suspense. We know something's going to happen. We just don't know when. And then it keeps the audience on the edge of the seat. And it's really fun for me because I know when it's coming out. So, yeah. I don't know, buddy, what you think in terms of Halloween for you as well, but I'm sure there's
Halloween was just amazing. I mean, it took me years until I could actually get all the way through it because, again, I was just so scared of it and just kept going back and then just hiding behind the sofa and missing huge chunks. Poltergeist, Halloween, Carrie. I just thought the first time I saw that, I was just so freaked out by the whole thing that I just thought, this is just so scary in so many different ways. And like the ending of Carrie and the idea of, when you watch the lineage to say how other horrors start to go, oh, that was really effective. So suddenly they'll take the device of that shock ending and they start to put it into their films. And I think films like Nightmare on Elm Street, I think Nightmare on Elm Street was the first one that actually jumped from the screen into my life, as in I believed the voodoo. I actually thought...
What, you didn't sleep for weeks?
I thought if I go to sleep, it could come and get me. And so it stopped. It became more than a horror. It became like a way of life that I thought, oh no, it's bedtime. What do I do? Because I just don't want to sleep. And so it's the things that scare you, you remember.
Yeah.
Because that's the way the human mind is designed to work. That's how it keeps you alive. You get burnt with something hot, you think, don't pick up fire again. And so when I think about the films from my childhood that I saw that had a big emotional influence on me, they were all horrors, really. They were the ones that really scared me. Like The Fog. When I first watched The Fog, I was just so scared. I just couldn't believe it. And I thought, why is my brother put on this film?
I was going to say, wasn't that when you were a kid and your brother was in charge of looking after you? And
and my mum left my brother to babysit, and she said to him, Dean, there is The Fog on television. Do not put that on. You'll be terrified, so don't put it on. I won't do. As soon as the door shut, click, it just went on. And it was... We couldn't get to the end of it. Me, my brother and sister were so scared, and we ended up watching 9 to 5, Dolly Parton, to try and cheer us up. We were watching it thinking, I've just got to take my mind off this. And it was strange seeing The Fog again when you have that big break in your movie history. You don't watch a film for like 20 years, and then it suddenly appears somewhere. You get a DVD and you go, oh, it's years since I've seen this. And it's just strange watching films as an adult and watching them as a kid. And you kind of can see it's so much more. It's like, you find it scary, but in a different way. It's really, when you're a child and you're watching films, they they work on your imagination in a totally different way. But it was interesting just seeing the extras of The Fog and seeing how John Carpenter was really disappointed with it, and it just felt like it was a box office flop. And just when you get something as successful as Halloween, how do you follow that up?
Right.
It's so difficult. But yeah, certainly those 80s horrors, for me, they were the ones that were the big influence.
What about Chris, Lauren? What about yours? If you don't mind me asking, what are your favourite horrors?
Go ahead, Lauren.
We start with you because one of them shared with you guys.
Yeah, it's funny that you said we had a baby. I was the oldest in our family growing up, so we had a babysitter come over, and he was like the cool high schooler, like the guy that kind of looked like Judd Nelson in Breakfast Club. Like he had the flannel, he had the Doc Martens, he had the holy jeans, and he brought Nightmare on Elm Street over, and he let us watch it. So like all my friends from the neighborhood came over, and we watched this movie, and it absolutely petrified me because Halloween, great. Like I've seen all these movies and I love them all. And like I have teenagers now, so we're going through some of the old '80s ones where I'm like, you've got to see this. And it's interesting that you said as an adult you see it differently. But Nightmare on Elm Street still scares me because you can't stop that one. I can outrun Jason. He never runs in a movie, but he somehow catches up to everybody. But there's always something that like I could get in a car and drive away from them if you had to. I could leave town. Or Freddy Krueger's there when you go to sleep, or Poltergeist. I was actually just watching that with my wife the other night because one of the channels here during October will just run Halloween movies all the time, and we got caught watching Poltergeist, and it was the beginning with them in a neighborhood, like you said, with a remote control car, or like where they're just kind of like talking in the bedroom, and you're just like. It's almost a nostalgic feel, but then I show my kids Poltergeist, and like, yeah, the last 10 minutes were cool. Well, you're so jaded, like you didn't get to the point. Like you've seen things now that like I didn't see when I was 14. It's so. But Nightmare on Elm Street is my all-time. Will always be my all-time favorite. I've showed it to everyone in my family. They do not get as scared as I do, but like still today, the scene where he puts his arms in the dream, I think it's in the beginning, kind of, he's chasing down the alley and his arms extend. While it's goofy kind of looking, it's just so scary because it makes you say, like, this is a dreamland and anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, to me, that was like, going to sleep at night, I'm with you, man. Like, Ryan, sleeping was horrifying after watching that movie.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And I'm sure I tormented Lauren when she was growing up with some horror movies. So,
I mean, as you thought, he was my big brother. So, but this was the thing with me is I've watched horror movies my whole life that I don't think my brain clicked that they were horror movies. Like we'd be watching like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. I'd seen loads. By the time I was 5, I think somebody was like, "Oh, what kind of films do you like?" And I was like, "I like Hitchcock films." And my parents were like, "Shut up."
We definitely grew up being able to listen and to watch things that
people should
were adult because it was like these are just words, like they're swearing or it's make believe. So it was like watch it for the entertainment value. So we were never shielded that way. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
but yes,
you're right.
He
Exactly.
was the kid at 5 that's saying like Psycho was great, and then everyone's like, "You're not allowed to hang out at their house."
Yeah. So my career choice was sort of determined early on. But because of that, though, and I was really interested in both of you were talking about how it's so different being scared when you're a kid from being scared as you're an adult. And I remember scrolling through your thing, you do the show for like 12 and up. Do you guys have to worry about younger audience, or is it like Chris with my nieces and nephews who they're so jaded it's kind of like writing for adults anyway?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean we've limited the swearing, haven't we, Ryan? In it, I guess that's one of the
so
things
not our household then.
There's still a couple of choice words in there, isn't there, in the script? I think.
Yeah.
Either that, or I've just ad-libbed them in by accident. Now the rest definitely isn't.
Yeah, we were very careful about the level of the violence, and we're a big fan of you don't see things, so we hint at what happens because we find that is it's when it's left to your imagination, it's scarier rather than when you see everything. So there's a lot that is referred to and you don't see. So we were very careful about the level of images. It's not a bloody show, and there's a couple of swear words, but they're very minor, very, very gentle. So yeah, we were comfortable with the audience being 12 because we really wanted to target that younger audience. We need. I don't know what the theatre scene is like in America, but certainly in the UK, it's an older generation are going to the theatre. It's not a playground for youngsters. And there's so much snobbery around horror that people like to turn their nose up at it. You know, it tends to be, you know, when horror, like when Psycho first came out, everyone was saying, what's Hitchcock doing? This is below him. This is, you know, this is trash. Why would he do this? And then it's always the same. It's like 20 years later with horror, people go, oh no, it's a classic now. So it's when horror first comes out, it's always just derided as, oh, it's dreadful. It's just cheap popcorn fodder. And then years later, people describe it as a classic. But it's consistent in targeting young people. And we think there's so much innovation that can take place within that horror space. You get some new blood that come in and do some amazing things with horror. And we need that in the theatre. So we really wanted a show where you could say, as a family, to the kids, who wants to go and see a theatre show? And they would all go, no. And you say, who wants to go and see a horror? They'll go, yeah, okay. So we thought that's the ticket. That's the way you get them in. You actually give them something they want to see. You show them horror. And they absolutely love it. You know, when we get the youngsters in the theatre, and it's so immediate, like Alex was saying, they just love it. It's just like the atmosphere is electric. That
little Chris, little Lauren, mum and dad going to the theatre, you know, to the theatre to see horror. That's kind of what we want, you know. It's, you know,
I would have been a bigger theater fan if I could see stuff like that. Miss Saigon, I can pass, but
it's
like
rarely done. It's very rarely done, horror. You know, I think Ryan's pretty much seen every single, in the last year, he watched every ghost story that was out. I've seen The Woman in Black 15 times, Ghost Stories, 222. There's really only those three really, you know, famous sort of theatre horror shows, those three over the last 30 years. And we'd love to be the fourth. That's what we're hoping for with it. But it's not done very often. And yet, as Ryan says, it pulls in such a young crowd, and we've had a lot of young people see it. And the atmosphere with young people in that theatre is incredible. We had the final night in Dorchester last year, and in Rugby this year, and in Exeter we were at a university theatre, which is a beautiful theatre, very supportive, very well attended, and it was fabulous. It's why we decided to do it in the first place, and it's brilliant. And long may that continue this year and next year, because we do a lot of workshops and activities as well, and it's supported by the Arts Council, which they're really keen on bringing younger people into theatres. So it's brilliant to be able to do that. And I was heavily inspired as a 15-year-old by horror theatre, so it's nice for it to almost come full circle and inspire the next generation of theatre makers with our own horror. She's great. I think.
No, that's awesome. What does your schedule look like? How does the theater schedule work? You're obviously not producing a movie, putting it out, and then it's there, and then it just kind of goes. How does the theater schedule work for you guys on your show?
Do you mean in terms of planning, Chris? Really,
or really just like when it runs and the planning and just that process in general. So, are you on break right now?
Yeah, we've had a week. We obviously go to Winchester in a few days. Then we're in Swindon, then Southend, then London, then Crewe. So we've got 5 more venues this year. Quite a lot of them have been split weeks. Again, as a company that's sort of still starting out in that horror genre, we've had 8 venues this year that have supported us. Next year, our aim is 12, which is 7 shows a week, 12 weeks, back to back to back to back to back, which is what a lot of mid-scale theatre companies do. And is what we're hoping to do next year, because the interest is so high now in the show, which is great, that next year we're almost fully booked for the tour for next year. And then it's almost that gradual from studio spaces to mid-scale long touring to the West End. That's the plan, I hope.
It would tend to be something like on a Tuesday, you'll get into the theatre.
Yeah.
And you'll get all the setting, you get the lights sorted, you test the sound system. You might go cue to cue, so you just go through all the cues in the show, make sure they're firing in the right place. And that would start like 9 o'clock in the morning, and then it'll be 7:30 that night. You do the performance. And then for the rest of the week, you could just go in a couple of hours before you're about to perform. Or sometimes what we often do is say, let's come in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and spend a few hours before the audience arrives, just looking at a sequence to say, we know this should be getting a scare. It is getting a good reaction, but what's going wrong? And that's just quite a forensic process where you've got the technical team and you say, could you run that again? But this time, delay playing that sound effect until after he's gone through the door. And you're going on instinct because you don't have an audience there, but you would tweak a scare, and then that night you would test it out, and you'd think, yes, we were right, or we still needs more work. And so on a Saturday, it would be that when the show comes down, it might be, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. You pack all the set and take all the set down, get it into the truck, and off you go again to another venue. So that tends to be your week. And if it's a split week, that basically means you'd split the week in half. You're doing 2 venues in 1 week, and then you're traveling overnight to the next place. So it depends. Sometimes, like in England, you could go from Exeter down at the coast, down in the south of the country, and then you might have to get up north to a venue. So we spend a lot of time, the early part of the year, planning the tour. There's a lot of work that goes in so that when it does go on tour, we've got as much in place as possible to make that process as easy as possible. But really, this show, we'd spent the whole year planning this, getting the team together, looking at set designs, going out, looking at illusionists, rewriting some of the script. So every year we just realize a bit more of, actually, this scene needs a bit of a tweak. And so we might rewrite it. We don't really like doing that in the middle of a tour, because a show like this is so technical. Alex is just there. He's got so much of the script that he's got to learn. Just actually changing 1 page and 4 lines it almost melts your head. It makes you just, you forget where you are and what your name is, and it's
a good idea visually. A melting head on stage.
yeah. So it tends to be that the rewrites we'll do at the start of a year so that we've got time to rehearse them in, and then we'll tweak things, but we don't really change the script once it's out on tour. So a lot of the work is in the pre-production, a bit like films. We spent a long time in pre-production this year, so that when it went into production, it was just we were as prepared as possible. But again, that's the difference with theatre and cinema, is that theatre, it just has to happen in the room. There's only so much you can do. I mean, because I've worked in film, we did do things like we storyboarded the whole show.
Wow.
So the whole show had a storyboard to it, so that we could work with the sound design and the composer to just try and get ahead of the game, so that when we arrived at the start of rehearsal, we had lots of assets in place so that for things like the voiceover with the puppet, we wanted that recorded already so that we could start to rehearse with that in the room on day one. So yeah, we borrowed a lot of techniques from cinema to actually put this play on. And we had to do that because sometimes we often find the creatives that come along just can't get their head around the concept of how are you going to use a cinema screen with live action. And when you read the scripts, that's something with some of the creatives that they just go, just don't understand how you're going to do it. And so we use the storyboard to show them. And they tend to watch it and go, oh, okay, I get how that interaction works now. So yeah, it's a long process. And when it's on tour, it's tiring. And that's where, for me as a writer-director, it's almost my world gets a lot easier, and suddenly it gets handed over to Alex as actor-producer to be exhausted. And
I don't mind. I never really get too tired because it's just so much fun for me.
Long days. It can be long days.
Yeah. We're blessed with a very good team that work long hours, and that they care about the show, and they're really supportive and they work hard. And yeah, we're very lucky. It's great. It's really great to have that. We did long hours in rehearsals, didn't we? But again, I never really felt like work. It doesn't really feel like work. It's just fun. Even though it's long hours, it's still fun.
And we were really lucky because we had the set almost from the start in rehearsals. And you often don't get that in theatre. But our set was there from the start. And the set is just so atmospheric. It really does put you in that creepy space. And so as an actor and as a director, it's like a playground when you get a really nice set to play on. You want to explore every bit of it and use every detail that's in there, because Ethan, who was the set designer, just created something so stunning and spooky. We often
find incredible detail.
Yeah, it's in that detail, and you get a reaction from the audience when they first come in, and it's in a kind of a pre-show state where you've just got some lights on there and a bit of haze, and they come in and they're just looking at the set. And something that we really wanted was the set to tell part of the story. So the set has a history to it. So when the audience sat down, they're thinking, why is that door looks burnt? And why does it looks like there's something behind there, like you could put your hand through there. And why is there film cans and film memorabilia on the floor next to something that looks like a building site? So you start in that intrigue from the start, from when the audience sit down. Those questions.
And we were very lucky as well, just to jump in on that with Ryan, is we were very, very lucky in that in rugby, we had a man, John, came to see the show, and he grew up in a cinema. He actually grew up in a cinema himself, and he genuinely said it brought back so many memories in terms of all the details, all the reels, all those things, as Ryan's just mentioned. He said it was scarily real, and I couldn't quite believe how realistic it was, which I thought was brilliant. A testament to Ryan's design, the creation of the story, and Ethan's design, that they were able to bring someone who'd actually grown up in a cinema to go, yeah, that's right. That was like that. So to have the detail that's so spot on.
That's awesome.
Is
great.
That's great. Yeah, that was brilliant.
We're hoping to meet him as well, aren't we?
We are. We're very. We're going to set some up at Christmas. Yeah, because it'd be great for you to meet him, won't it? So,
fascinating.
Lovely. And I know we're getting towards the end of our hour, but I wanted to make sure I gave all of our listeners here in England a chance to know. Obviously, you're sold out now, but where can we find tickets for next year? Where are you going to be? I know you're going to be in London, I think Southend on Sea, but where else are you going to be, and how can we get our tickets?
There's still some tickets available this year, Lauren, if
Oh,
you
great.
want,
Yeah,
for
where?
Shock Horror. Yeah, I mean, it's thunderroadtheatre.org/Shock Horror Tour. That'll give the details of all the tour dates that we've still got. But like I said, we've got Winchester, then we're in the Wyvern in Swindon from the 2nd to the 4th of November. The Palace Theatre in Southend, that sold really well from the 7th to 8th of November. We then go to the Beck Theatre in Hayes in London, 13th to the 15th of November. And then we end in Crewe Lyceum, 16th to the 18th of November. And that's this year. And then we open again next year in September. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say what the dates are yet, but we open in Scotland. We open in Scotland next year. So it's a wonderful tour that goes to Wales, Scotland, England, and even hopefully Ireland if we're lucky. And then America in 2025, hopefully. So, yeah. But thunderroadtheatre.org would be the place to find all the details on Shock Horror.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure to put this in our YouTube sort of description, but I'll put up a placard on the edited over of me saying this so that people can get to it. And I'll put in the dates for the shows for the rest of this year. So people go get your tickets. And then we always like to end by asking, we usually ask, are there any horror movies you look forward to? But equally, please feel free to say any theater things that you think people should be aware of that are coming out soon.
I mean, the Stranger Things that's opening in London soon, that looks quite exciting, doesn't it, Ryan? We need to go and see that, don't we? I don't even know whether it's a musical or whether it's an event or it's a theatre show. I don't know. It looks good.
They're keeping it tight-lipped, but I think it's something a bit more like immersive theatre.
Yeah, great.
They're doing that. And then, for me, I can't wait to see the Nosferatu remake. I don't know when that is coming out. Do you guys know when that's coming out?
I think it's supposed to be like the big summer blockbuster. You're talking about the one with Skarsgård? Is that one of the Skarsgårds is playing Nosferatu, right?
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So. I think it's the isn't it the guy who did The Witch as well? Did he do The Witch?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Same director.
Yeah. So yeah. Ooh, can't wait to see.
Yeah, that's supposed to be next year, but I think it's going to be the summer blockbuster one.
Right. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. So we'll do Stranger Things and then Nosferatu.
That's good. That's some good stuff right there.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Absolutely, George.
Just loved hearing about the show. I really need to figure out a way to come and see it. Really need to start working with, I need to start making some phone calls around the East Coast here and get people signed up to bring you guys over. So thank you so much for joining and telling us about what you guys are working on. And I hope every show is sold out. It sounds like an amazing show.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, it's been amazing.
It's amazing on the show.
Thanks so much. And then finally, just thank you guys so much to our listeners. Please, feel free to listen out to the rest of we've got a Hollow week of interviews, and this has obviously been amazing, and hopefully will incite you to want to listen to a few more that we have. So thank you for listening. And of course, thank you again for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, please head to our Facebook or YouTube pages. We're grateful to Kukurbit, who made our music. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time for the London Horror Movie Club.